generation that forgot how to think. That is not an insult, it is a diagnosis. And if you are watching this, there is a very good chance it includes you. There was a time, not long ago, when silence was a normal part of being alive. You waited for the bus and you just stood there. You sat in a waiting room and you stared at a wall. You lay in bed before sleep and your mind wandered wherever it wanted to go. Nobody called that meditation. Nobody called it mindfulness. It did not have a name because it did not need one. It was just what being human felt like when nothing was happening. Nothing does not happen anymore. We killed it, quietly, gradually, one pocket-sized screen at a time. We filled every empty moment with input. Every pause, every gap, every breath of cognitive silence that used to exist between one task and the next. We paved over all of it with feeds and notifications and short videos and endless, bottomless content that asks nothing of us and gives nothing back. And in doing so, we destroyed something we did not even know we needed. Your brain has a system. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. It activates when you are not focused on anything external. When your mind wanders, when you daydream, when you stare out a window with no particular thought in mind. It is the network responsible for some of the most important cognitive work your brain does. Self-reflection, memory consolidation, imagining the future, making connections between ideas that seem unrelated, creativity in its purest form. The default mode network is where your brain goes to think about things without being told what to think about. Research published in the journal Brain found that this network plays a direct causal role in creative thinking. When scientists disrupted it using cortical stimulation, creative output dropped measurably. The default mode network is not background noise. It is the engine of original thought, and it only turns on when you are doing nothing. That is the part we lost. Not because we chose to, because nothing became unbearable. Silence became a void that needed filling. Boredom became an emergency that required an immediate response. And the response was always the same, the phone, every time. Researchers at the University of Texas ran experiments with nearly 800 people and found that the mere presence of a smartphone, even when it is turned off and face down on a desk, reduces your available cognitive capacity. Not because you are distracted by notifications, because your brain is spending resources suppressing the urge to check it. The device does not need to be on to steal from you. It just needs to be nearby. It sits in your pocket like a whisper you cannot stop hearing. And every moment you spend resisting it is a moment your brain cannot spend thinking. Here is where the philosophy gets uncomfortable. A mind that is never bored is a mind that never creates. That is not a slogan. That is a neurological fact. Every original idea you have ever had, every solution that came to you in the shower, every moment of clarity that arrived when you were not trying, those came from the default mode network, activating during periods of low stimulation. Boredom was never the enemy. Boredom was the soil. And we salted the earth with content. Think about what we replaced it with. We did not fill the silence with great art or deep conversation or learning. We filled it with reaction videos and ambient noise and strangers eating food on camera and 10-second clips of things that do not matter set to music we will forget by tomorrow. We traded the space where human thought is born for an endless conveyor belt of stimulation that requires nothing from us except our time. And we gave it willingly because the alternative, sitting still, felt worse. Dr. Gloria Mark at the University of California has been tracking attention spans on digital devices for over 2 decades. In 2004, the average time a person spent focused on a single screen before switching was 2.5 minutes. By 2012, it had dropped to 75 seconds. By 2020, it was 47 seconds. Her most recent measurements put it at roughly 40 seconds. That is not a decline, that is a collapse. In 20 years, our ability to sustain focus on one thing fell by over 80%, and it happened so gradually that nobody noticed because the very thing causing the damage was also the thing making it feel normal. There is a generation alive right now that has never known what it feels like to be truly bored. They have had a screen in their hands since before they could form sentences. Every moment of waiting, every stretch of quiet, every car ride, every meal, every bedtime, there was always a device ready to fill the gap. And so the default mode network, the system that needs silence to function, never got the chance to fully develop its rhythm. A mind that has never been bored is a mind that has never been forced to generate something from within itself. It has only ever received, never produced, always consuming, never creating. And we wonder why original thought feels like it is disappearing. The cruel irony is that we have more access to information than any generation in human history, and less ability to do anything meaningful with it. We can look up anything, but we cannot sit with a single idea long enough to let it become something. A thought enters the mind, and before it can take root, before it can grow into an insight, or a question, or a creation, the next video loads and the thought is gone, replaced by nothing. Again. The mind has become a hallway where ideas pass through, but none of them stay long enough to unpack. There's something deeply philosophical about what we have lost, and most people will never slow down long enough to realize it. The ability to sit in silence and let your own mind speak to you is not a luxury. It is the foundation of what it means to be a conscious, thinking, self-aware human being. Every philosophy worth reading, every invention worth building, every piece of art worth remembering came from someone who sat with nothing long enough for something to emerge, not from consumption, from emptiness. The ideas that change the world do not come from the feed. They come from the space between the feeds, and that space barely exists anymore. A study published in Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience tested young adults on creative tasks and found that those who scored highest on smartphone addiction scales performed significantly worse in fluency, flexibility, and originality. Not because they were less intelligent, because the pattern of constant stimulation had weakened their ability to produce ideas that were genuinely their own. The phone did not make them less creative by replacing their creativity with something better. It made them less creative by making sure they never had to be creative at all. The muscle atrophied because it was never used, and it was never used because the phone was always there to fill the moment where creation would have started. We live in a world now where a person can go an entire day without a single original thought entering their mind, not because they are incapable, because there is no room. The input never stops, the feed never ends, the silence never arrives, and without silence the default mode network stays dormant, the mind stays in reactive mode, and the only thoughts a person has are responses to what they have been shown, never what they have imagined on their own. That is what it means to be the generation that forgot how to think. Not that we cannot think, that we forgot what thinking feels like when it is not a reaction to something on a screen. We forgot that the mind, left alone, produces things, dreams, ideas, questions that have no Google result, thoughts that are strange and half-formed and entirely, beautifully yours. That is what lives in the silence. That is what lives in the boredom. That is what dies every time you reach for your phone, because sitting still for 30 seconds felt like too much. But here's the thing about the default mode network. It does not disappear. It waits. It is sitting underneath all the noise right now, ready to activate the moment you give it room. Your brain has not forgotten how to think. It has just been given no reason to try. The capacity is still there. The creativity is still there. The original thought, the daydream, the strange idea that leads somewhere you never expected. It is all still in there, buried under hours and days and years of content that asked nothing of you and gave nothing back. So put the phone down, not forever, just long enough to feel the discomfort. Long enough for the boredom to arrive, long enough for your brain to realize that nobody is feeding it, and it has to start feeding itself. That is where thinking begins. Not in the scroll, not in the feed, in the silence that we forgot was ours. The generation that forgot how to think did not lose the ability. It lost the habit, and habits, unlike time, can be rebuilt.